Well, good morning, buddy. Thought it'd be fun today. Episode 2, I dubbed this one Rockin' Gnoll. Because, well, that's what we're going to talk about. The Gnolls. The frenzy, crazy hyena people that we've all encountered at some point or another in our lovely little adventure. At some point or another, I would like to assume. A lot of people don't realize this, but as far as the Gnolls go, they're one of the younger races that we see in Lordaeron. They I think they started around the year 2700 BDP, which is before the Dark Portal. It's been rumored that Bran Bronzebeard thinks they might be a descendant of an ancient guardian, like one of the hyena ancient guardians, but it's only been a theory. It's never been proven. But the thing about the Gnolls is they're quite populous. There's more of them than we think, and they've never really been given the credit that they kind of deserve, because they're not exactly the smartest, right? So normally they're pretty disorganized and quite brutal, but 75 years prior to the First War, the Gnolls became a major threat for Stormwind. Back then there was a leader, his name was Garfang. The Gnolls began attacking the farmsteads and the convoys and the villages until they gathered enough resources to literally attack the gates of Stormwind. They called it the Gnoll War. Came close to actually came close to overtaking Stormwind, but King Brathenrin, he was kind of known as the Adamant. He rode with this small party of knights out to Red Ridge, and he decided to, okay, we're gonna wreak havoc on these things, and ended up killing Garfang. After they didn't have such a unified leader, they kind of fell apart and became this disheveled, disorganized, sub race that we all know them to be today. They scattered all across the land. They, going from Altaric to Red Ridge, that entire Red Ridge range. And they've even spilled over to Kalimdor a little bit. Before the Third War, a half-starved pack of Gnolls, they went to this farmhouse, I think it was Farmhouse Alicia in Strandbrad over in Lordaeron, stealing livestock, and they were kidnapping this kid named Timmy. Now, we've all remembered Timmy, just because there's a quest for him, in the midst of the Elven Forest questline. So after kidnapping Timmy, they threw him in their hideout in the forest, and they caged him, and they were super afraid. Well, Alicia was super afraid that they were going to eventually eat the kid. So she ran and asked, at the time, Prince Arthas, later known to become the Lich King, to help rescue Timmy. So Arthas, of course, back then, took it upon himself to find the hideout, defeated the Gnolls that took him, released Timmy, and then Alicia comes, and takes Timmy home. So literally everybody at some point or another has had to deal with these fuzzy little anger beasts. In the original WoW, most of the Gnolls were in Red Ridge. That was the first big place, aside from Elwyn. Like, you would come across them here and there in Elwyn Forest, possibly. But Red Ridge Mountains was like the first notorious plagued place that the Gnolls were known to fight the dwarves and human kingdoms. they're now being seen. The river paws are becoming more ominous. Those are the ones that you see in Elwyn Forest, because that's, Hogger. Everyone knows who Hogger is. So many speculate that in the more historical times, that the dim-witted gnolls have conspired with some other force, equipping them with weapons, or some kind of tactical leadership, or some kind of magic. It's not really clear what they were ever after, but the Marshals of Stormwind realized that, hey, they're really a threat, and they should probably be eradicated. So it's funny because even though they're indigenous to like Alterac and the range of the Red Ridge Mountains and everything like that, they're extremely aggressive, but they're often found quarreling amongst each other. It's kind of hilarious because, say I was a Gnoll, you were a Gnoll, and we were trying to get to this leadership, but at the same token got sidetracked because you had mentioned my shadow's bigger than yours. It's a fight to the death. It's just that simple. That's which is why that's really the biggest thing that deters them from furthering their efforts to global takeover. Because essentially, if they put the forces together and had the mentality behind it, they totally could. It's also kind of known that being that fearsome, if they ever stop tearing each other apart for long enough, they could organize into an army, kind of like they were before the Dark Portal times. They're not necessarily not intelligent, but they're just kind of belligerent. They value strength more than anything else. They're both fierce and formidable and known in combat, but they've been employed mostly as mercenaries. And their fighting is limited towards intelligence because they need constant supervision. So because they're always hungry, they're continuously saying, hey, we gotta go kill this guy. Oh my god, there's a squirrel. What was I doing? Sort of thing. But they're not as dumb as they seem. There's kind of an animal cunning over them. They run as a pack, which is to be expected, and every pack has its alphas, and it's usually the biggest, strongest, most brutal or ruthless member that kind of chew their way to the top for dominance, if you will. And those are the guys that are giving the orders. Those are the named gnolls that we come across. There was one time a mage from the Kirin Tor managed to gain an audience of a Gnoll clan leader in Red Ridge by performing a simple spell. He taught is one of those spells that they kind of taught to Dalaran school kids, and for the day that particular Gnoll leader became very friendly to the mage until it forgot the trick, got offended, and sicked the hunters on the mage. But before that, the Kirin Tor discovered that if they can bother to pay attention for long enough, that they can be taught, but they typically focus on a elemental shaman type of way of practice. The cool thing about gnolls is, stature wise, they tend to be about 4.5 as youths, 5 feet tall as adults. There are a few that can be over, up to 6 foot. And those ones are really the ones to pay attention to, because they can leap walls, because they're that much more developed. They're that much more aggressive. They've gotten that way because they're savage. But despite being so warlike, they have been known to be able to be traded with or even befriended. They laugh, so there is a consciousness there. And they're sometimes friendly interactions with other races start after they fight, and then eventually laugh at the same time. They always meet you with rage. And if we all think about it hard enough, we can hear that little cackle that they have. Most of the clans, however, are not open for trading. Those are the ones that require a show of strength and respect before trading can even begin. The show of strength is usually combat with the leader of the Gnoll clan. It's common tradition that when, as far as they're so messed up, like say the leader dies, the rest of the clan then, they don't really do burials. They don't really do ceremonies like you see in the Tauren world. They don't really have funerals. They just devour the body. Because to a Gnoll, meat is meat. And they'll even go as far as to cannibalize outcasts who return to their territories. They've been known to enslave kobolds, which are, you know, the guys with the candles on top of their head you always see in the mines. They kind of force them into a world of never-ending tasking. There is such a thing as female gnolls, even though we don't typically see them. They can also hold co-leadership roles as matriarchs, but sometimes control whole clans. So it's not that they're not seen, they're just rare. If you want to get into the specifics, like I'm pretty sure you could persuade a Gnoll to do anything that you want them to do with a hard-boiled chicken, eggs that are pickled in brine. Like, if you want to offend them, you offer ogre meat. Like, it's funny. Gnolls are often named after the parent, which is kind of a common practice to show that there is some kind of legacy that they hold. And during the Third War, many Gnolls were then introduced to the crossbow. It's kind of really unknown where they find said weapons, but I'm just, in my mind, chalking it up to all the pillaging and raiding they do on the farmsteads. Like, it's not an uncommon thought to think that farmers wouldn't have some kind of weaponry to control coyotes or whatever varmint they have, you know, kind of infesting their livelihood. Most of the stomping grounds for the Gnolls, like I said, were the Eastern Kingdoms, but they've also been seen in Kalimdor, usually under, if you notice it, they work a lot with the goblins, right? A lot of the goblin cartels, sounds still funny saying goblin cartels. It's funny, it's not uncommon to see the goblin cartels kind of employ Gnolls to be mercenaries, to kind of be their savage security, if you will. There was one Gnoll's, he was a seer named Sage. He travels with the Dark Moon Fair. He gives out fortunes and gives different buffs based on how you answer his questions. So there is form of communication, right? They were first seen, if we date back, in the third Warcraft, during the Reign of Chaos. Brawl leaves his home after this dream that tells him to meet a stranger. He destroys this camp of Gnolls and levels up. The Gnolls in question were most likely Mosshide, just due to their coloration, due to their location. But there's multiple different clans of tribes of the Gnolls. We have the Woodpaw. They're out in Ferales. We have the Wildpaw. They're in Altaric Valley. Then Redridge ones, of course, they're led by Yowler, I believe. They're just called the Redridge Gnolls. You have the Riverpaw Gnolls, who you see a lot because they're allies with, like I said, with Hogger. He's their leader, and they kind of coexist and work with the Defias Brotherhood. You got the Pale Mane ones out in Mulgore in the Tauren starting zones. You got the Grimtails that are in Desolus, although I don't know if they're there anymore. The Axes of Awful were the ones that the Mosshides. They're in the wetlands in Lochmadan. That was Sagepaw was the guy that ran them. If you go to the Underlight Mines in the Ghostlands, I think they're the Blackpaw? I want to say they're the Blackpaw. But then you have like the Blackmane Mercenaries. Those are the group that they kind of ally with the Zandalari trolls during the invasion of the Kunlai Summit, which was led by, I think he actually had a rank. It was like Captain Ripflesh or something like that. A lot of them found in the eastern Red Ridge Mountains. That is, he has another one, General Fangor. He was up on like the in the Shadowhide area. My favorite ones personally are the Rothides. Those are the ones that you find in Tristful Glades, because they're technically the only undead gnolls, and they were formerly from Silverpine Forest, and they followed that Thule Ravenclaw guy. He was like their leader. What I like about the gnolls is they're known to be cunning. They have these super hot tempers, and they have this inner fighting. It's just, I don't know, it's really fascinating, because they're more than just your typical intelligent beast, but they tend to lack finer reasoning than most other like sentient races. They enjoy fighting almost to a fault, but gnolls make their home in Lordaeron, but they spread out. You know, they're kind of nomadic. The tendency for them to challenge each other over those little matters like who's tallest or who can jump farther or stuff like that prevents them from achieving any real unity, and kind of lessens their overall threat, which is good because, like I said, their numbers are so massive. If they were moved to move an area at a time, they could overrun almost any race of equal strength, period. Occasionally, they also hire out. You know, that's where the kobolds come in, but usually if they're going to be mercenaries for hire, they're going to do it in a group of like 2 or 5 warriors. Being so hyena-like, they can stand, I think if they stand straight up, you know, being 5 foot, they're close to 7 foot if they are fully erect. They also, you know, you can tell who the tribes are by their appearance. You can tell either they're reddish brown or black or green gray or yellow mane. And they go from like, I think, a pale blue to a bloodshot eye. Typically kind of close together. Wet conditions, they often give this distinctive musky odor, right? It's being carnivores, they consider all creatures as food. So including, you know, they're members of their own race. Hunger is more of a driving force for them to do what you want than gold is, which is hilarious. They don't really care about any magical properties of items. Food is their number one. They don't really have any respect for any other races in particular. It's more or less if say a goblin walked up to him and say, "Hey, I got 5 steaks for you to take out this dude." And then a night elf walked up and it was like, "I have 7 steaks for you to kill the dude that just offered you 5. Guy who offered 5, gone. Like, it's that simple. They don't do any metal work, although they are pretty well known for having some pretty, some rather savvy mining capabilities. But you don't really see what comes of it. The thing about the gnolls is they like to attack when they have the upper advantage. They kind of group their tactics around their physical ability, so you can kind of overwhelm and knock down their opponent. They only show a little bit of discipline unless they have like a strong leader. If they have a strong voice, then they do what they're told. They can maintain the ranks and fight as a unit, but only if they have the leadership to command so. They always kind of take special care to seek the most favorable conditions as possible. Like, they love darkness, they love cover, they love, some form of advantageous condition when laying ambushes out. They're not really ones to meet in the field in a Braveheart situation of opposing sides and meet in the middle. They are kind of rogues by nature, and then everything else falls into place. But being on their society front of them, they kind of, what's the word? They kind of organize it completely around might. So if you're the strongest and deadliest Gnoll, you kind of ascend your way to this tribal order to become the leader, right? While the weaker ones soon become like the food for the rest of them because they can't keep up and they kind of fall to the wayside. It also prevents Gnolls from organizing for very long into anything for more than like the size of a tribe. It displays like a limited specialization. So brutes are the largest and nastiest ones, and they're made stronger by their privileged position on the food chain, where assassins are noted for their intelligence as use complex weapons, and they know more how to survive, so they don't necessarily become the biggest. Poachers are kind of like the scouts and the hunters for the tribes, and they use weapons more or less to take down prey, where wardens have developed this magical connection with nature, kind of like the elemental shamanism that we've all seen, to use their power to keep the other Gnolls in line. They primarily do best as, from what I've seen, hunters and warriors. That inborn aggression and decidedly cruel nature drives them to pursue any little scuffle with sheer pleasure of the capture and usually the kill. Their spellcasters tend to be strongly elemental and with warlike tendencies. So occasionally a Gnoll might join an adventuring party in pursuit of some enemy that they have in common. But sometimes a Gnoll is ousted from a Gnoll society and must make his way in the world outside. Adventuring bands who value like this aggressive, persistent hunters and warriors, they might allow a Gnoll to join them, but Gnoll characters may take up with either the Alliance or Horde, depending on which group has their primary enemy. You know what I mean? So they're not really biased as far as who they're going to help out. It's kind of like this Sylvanas mentality of who's going to serve me best. Yeah, I said it. But Gnolls in nature are completely violent. They've been known to pick lethal fights over the most insane arguments. It just kind of make vicious, unreliable mercenaries. If you think about it, like, would you really want to hire a guy who's just as likely to kill his employer as he is his target? You know, sort of thing. But because they run, you know, they come for cheap, you risk it. They're also super lazy at the same token. They prefer to pillage and steal what they want rather than work for it. Which is funny because the longest and strongest Gnoll group in the group is known as, like, they call him a brute, right? So he is the, like, de facto leader of the tribe, and all the other ones submit to him. But they don't really do anything. They have the rest of the tribe kind of do the raiding, do the looting, and then he comes in, puffs his chest, makes his little cackle, and gets first dibs. Which is, I mean, it's pretty primitive, and not terribly far from being believable, because we've seen it in human civilizations for eons. You know, you just climb the ranks of being the baddest ass, if you will, and then having your minions do your bidding. Most Gnolls use melee or ranged weapons, like I said, but some with the magic and the warlock magic, their favorite weapons are like maces. They love nothing more than blunt force trauma. So you don't really, unless it's a brute, you don't really see them holding a sword or an axe, or it's mostly like clubs, maces, staves, something that can just break a bone, open a wound, and give them some place to chew. Essentially, a lot of them can be seen wearing like this round crest with a paw print in the middle. It's kind of, I've seen it a lot, but I don't know if that signifies, I'm assuming that signifies the tribe that they're with. So they're going to be able to recognize themselves in case there's a coup or some kind of mercenary trying to fit in who won't have the right crest to show, sort of thing. But yeah, the coolest thing about the Gnolls is the language, right? They primarily speak Low Common, which is kind of like English, just a short, bad version of it. There's not a lot of whole lot of filler words in between the things that they're trying to point across. They can also speak languages that are directly influenced to their surroundings. So you have, I'm sure there's the ones that can speak Torhe, or there's the ones that can come across as knowing Orcish, or Thalassian, or Darnassian, or anything around them. Their only known, like, native language is the Cha-Cha-Ta, which, weirdly enough, is only known almost instantaneously by skeletal mages. But it's kind of been lost in the eons. It's kind of a thing of the past. So they're now most commonly speaking either Low Common, Broken Common, but I'd say the Uncommon is the most frequent. But the adaptability makes them threatening. Like, who's to say, now that we're in such upheaval, and a lot of us in the hero side of things that are going to the Shadowlands, who's to say with all of us leaving to go help the rest of the world that the Gnolls aren't going to have some huge come together? Because there's going to be a lot less things for them to be hired out for. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not terribly sure. But that's the stuff that I have on the Gnolls. I'd be open to anybody having any insights or more things that they know. You can totally drop an email if you guys have questions or little bits of things that even I might not know about it. It is the Barons Chat Podcast at gmail.com. Next week is going to be a little bit more festive, right? So we have Hollow's End going on right now. In game is probably one of my favorite events, period. Aside from Wintervale. Wintervale is always a good one too. But we're gonna dive into the whole history of the one and only Headless Horseman, because not a lot of people realize that guy's actually got a little bit to him. He's a little bit, not a whole lot. It'd be a short one, but definitely worth visiting, especially the week of Halloween. But on that note, I myself am Ziggy Salvation. I will hope to see you guys next week. Thanks for stopping by.